If an 8-inch height difference between Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora wasn't enough for Tszyu to deal with, definitely a face full of blood was. It happened in the third round when Tszyu tried to slip a punch and went low. But as he went low, he leaned forward into Sebastian Fundora's high guard, and by the man being 6'5", 6'6", it was like Tszyu head grazed a razor blade, and Sebastian Fundora elbow cut him across the head very deep. And that changed the complexion of the fight for the rest of the night. Because the first 2 rounds, it actually looked like Tszyu had something working. He was in there cooking. He was throwing straight rights, popping Sebastian right through his high guard, left hook to the body. Overhand right was the recipe for the night for Tszyu. And he was cooking up until the end, until that cut, and it changed everything. And the guy could not stop bleeding. His corner could not contain that deep gash that was on top of Tszyu's head. But what made things even more interesting, the fact that Tszyu was landing those straight rights right down the pipe on the giant, Sebastian Fundora, he actually broke Fundora's nose. So now you got one guy bleeding non-stop from his nostrils to his mouth, the other guy bleeding from the top of the head, blood pouring like a bottle of Heinz ketchup, and that was the stage for the night. It was literally blood and guts. And the amazing thing to me that it went 12 rounds. The doctors kept checking, one asking if Fundora can he breathe because of his broken nose, and the non-stop pouring of the blood from Tszyu. I mean, this blood was like pouring like you do with a pitcher of red Kool-Aid. I was a little concerned because the amount of blood that Tszyu was losing, because his corner definitely couldn't contain it. I was worried about him getting lightheaded and dizzy during the fight. And you can tell in round 3 the desperation, in round 4 the desperation of Tszyu, because he was worried about the stoppage, because it has to go 4 rounds before it get to the scorecard. The doctors had to stop it before round 4, then he would have lost that fight due to an injury. So I figured the amount of blood this man was losing, that once he got to the end of round 4, that it was going to go to the scorecards, and you could have said it was 2 rounds apiece and it would have been a draw and they would have had a rematch. But give the doctors credit, give the referee credit. It was a unified title bout and they let those guys go at it. Now for the first time, the towering giant, Sebastian Fundora, actually used his height like he was always supposed to. The reason why he never jabbed is because he said he likes to fight, he liked to get on the inside. But you have these gifts. Dude, you 6'5". 6'6". Your average opponent in that weight division is 5'6", 5'8". And I never understood, and that's why he got caught with Mendoza. And when that big man hit the mat, it definitely made a sound. So Sebastian Fundora used his height, started jabbing. His daddy told him, which was great advice, just keep touching him. Just keep touching him. There's no need for you to risk anything. And that's exactly what Fundora did. Tszyu, he was throwing one shot because the man couldn't see and he was missing. Tszyu was actually an accurate puncher, but the dude was missing and you can't blame him. He couldn't see. This guy was literally trying to parry shots and wipe his eyes at the same time. Blood splattering everywhere. Both bodies of Fundora and Tszyu covered in blood, front and back. The ring covered in blood. Both men gloves got so much blood on there, looked like a can of paint poured on their fist, and it was just slinging it over everywhere like a work of art. And at the end of it all, it was a split decision, and Sebastian Fundora became a unified champion. Congrats to him, no hate. In a fight game, whatever happened in the ring, it is what it is, and he did what he was supposed to. But what I found very interesting was at the very end of that fight, in the post-in-ring comments, well, after the fight, and Tszyu said what he said, and Fundora said what he said, that they brought Errol Spence in the ring. Now I understand he's a PBC fighter, and I know everybody talking about, well, what about Terrence Crawford? How you gonna get the man that lost an opportunity at 154 to be unified champion, and a guy that beat him on the outskirts? As a fight fan, I can see where y'all coming from. It ain't right, but that's the business of boxing. Y'all gotta admit, if y'all been keeping up with the fight game and keeping up with what happened with Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford during the negotiations, I don't think PBC want to go down that road again. I don't even think that they worried about Terrence Crawford beating their fighters. Hell, PBC put their own fighters through the Shark Tank to meet Griner. It was such a bad experience to negotiate, and he's a free agent. He does not have a promoter So now you got to come up with the funds. It's like a whole thing. But I really think the fact that he was so difficult to deal with, the fact in the middle of negotiations that he switched up and had another fight, which is his own business, but to do it in the middle of negotiations and leading them to believe it's just y'all two is bad business. So from that perspective, I don't blame PBC. I mean, why? The dude, a free agent, does not have a promoter. And if y'all don't understand how big of a promoter is in a boxer's career, it's huge, because they're the guys who put up the money to cover their fighter. It's not up to one promoter to cover not only his fighter, but the opponent as well, especially when our opponent is a free agent, because it become a lose-lose. They putting all the money up, and no business is in the business of losing money. So I see why they did announce Errol Spence as the next possible opponent, but Tim Tszyu does have a rematch. The dude took the fight on 12 days notice, couldn't see, had a face full of blood, looking like Red Skull from Captain America. We'll wait and see. Y'all know how the boxing game is. It's the theater of the unknown, inside the ring and outside. And I'm out.